The cloud. Good evening and welcome to the Finance Committee agenda for the Town of Yarmouth, April 7th, 2021. This is a remote participation meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing a limitation on the number of people that may gather in one location. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information such as instructions and guidelines for remote by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.ma.us.
Thank you. I'd like to first welcome our new town administrator, Bob Rittenhauer. I believe I got that correct, right?
Rittenhauer, yes.
Rittenhauer, yes. And our new interim assistant town administrator, Bob Lawton, who keeps coming. He's the Energizer Bunny. We're going to open with a roll call. So if we could just start, we'll go right down the line. Stephanie. Steph.
Here.
Yep. Sarah.
Here.
George.
Here.
Nate.
Here.
And I am here as well. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening. I think we're going to push the budget transfers towards the end, if it's okay with everybody else. I'd rather get in our folks in the waiting room for the sake of time, for their time that they're giving us this evening. So without further ado, we have Barry Margolin, Michael Duffy, Jim Wolf, and I believe one other participant, but I don't have the name of.
You have Tom Barron, who will be talking about solarizing the links course, and then we're waiting on Madhavi Mahanka for her plastic bottle ban. So would you like to see all of the Mr. Margolin, Mr. Wolf, and Mr. Duffy all at once?
Right, I believe they're all on the same 3 items. So yes, please.
You've got it. There we are.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Barry. Thanks for joining us, Jim and Michael. Barry, if you'd like to introduce yourself and start with your presentation, that'd be great.
Thank you for inviting us. I'm Barry Margolin. I live in West Yarmouth. I'm a member of the Town Energy Committee and I guess the ringleader of the Yarmouth Climate Action Network, which has emerged over the past year or so. Probably most visibly, 170 of us signed petitions last fall to put a pair of articles on the fall town meeting warrant last year, but we agreed, given the COVID crisis, to defer them and refile them in slightly modified form for the Springtown meeting. So those are 2 of the articles. We're responding to a sense that the climate crisis is something that all levels of government have to respond to, but on the Cape, the towns are the most critical part of that. And recently, the Assembly of Delegates and the Cape Cod Commission have adopted amendments to the regional policy plan, specifying goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions for the entire Cape. But we've got 3 articles and we'll try to describe each of them. Mike Duffy is Mike here? There you are.
I'm here.
Is our community solar coach for the Solarize project. And the first article is a resolution that simply endorses a program that the town has already sponsored. But it's a way to bring the town as a community together around this project. So Mike, do you want to talk about this article?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, fellow committee members, I am a member of the Yarmouth Energy Committee and am the solar coach for the Solarize Plus Yarmouth program, as Barry mentioned. And I'd like to take a few minutes to briefly explain the 5 parts of this particular article, which are consistent with the Energy Committee's annual operating plan. As Barry mentioned, it's a resolution, not a bylaw, So it does a lot of encouraging, or as I like to say, inspiring energy sustainability. So I guess I had a PowerPoint presentation put together, but I guess I can't share my screen, right?
I can make you share your screen if you would like. I'm trying to
okay.
I'd be happy to do that for you.
All right. So
Barry,
tell me.
Participants. Barry, you are a co-host, so you can share your screen.
And I can too?
Is it Barry who's
No,
speaking? Mr.
Mike
Duffy?
Duffy.
Sorry, Mr. Duffy, go right ahead. You're a co-host and you can share as well.
Okay, I'm not, you're a co-host, so if I hit share.
There you go.
See it? You see
Yes.
it? Oh, okay. All right. Let's see if I can, okay. All right, so the objectives of this warrant article to request the basically the backing of the town Board of Selectmen, which have already seen this several months ago, but 5 particular points there. The Solarized Plus Yarmouth program, also the energy efficiency audit program that's offered by Cape Light Compact. Would also like to promote the benefits of electric vehicles, and we want to not just address the residents, homeowners in Yarmouth, but also small businesses for energy saving opportunities through Solarize, and also then to support the annual operating plan for the Yarmouth Energy Committee's efforts, which, as I mentioned, was to inspire energy sustainability. So what is Solarize Plus Yarmouth? Well, just last week, we basically decided upon 2 preferred contractors, one for installing PV solar and a second to install air source heat pumps. So this program is basically part of the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center's Solarize program, which they've been running since, I think, 2011. And right now, unless things change with the governor's budget, this could be the very last year of it. So we got in just in time. And essentially what it does is offer competitive pricing on both the solar PV and the air source heat pumps. And I'm happy to say that all of us on the all volunteer team, by the way, that is basically running this for the town of Yarmouth, happy to say that we have got a PV solar installer who's giving us an absolutely excellent price on the installation of these. Barry, for one, has installed PV solar on his rooftop, which he did, I think it was about 4 years ago. And the price that we're getting now is almost half of what Barry had to pay for his system. So the goals of the Solarize Yarmouth program, first thing we have to do is educate and outreach to the Yarmouth residents to let them know what the solar PV is all about, how it can save them a whole lot of money on their electric bills. And also with regard to the air source heat pumps, how people could, for instance, replace their old inefficient window air conditioners with these new air source heat pumps, also known as mini splits, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. If you don't have any yourself, you may have seen them in a lot of the small businesses around town. The second thing is to simplify this whole process for deciding whether you really should install solar PV on your rooftop, if you're a homeowner or on the rooftop of your small business. Can be a complicated decision process, lots of things to consider, not only that from a technical aspect, but from a financial aspect. Another thing, as I mentioned, we are reducing the cost of both these solar energy systems and these air source heat pump systems, which are going to result in dramatic savings for the Yarmouth residents and small businesses. Some of our preliminary indications are that a homeowner could expect to have this entire system paid off in a 4-year time period. So it will have paid for itself in 4 years. Everything after that 4-year period is basically money in the bank for the for the homeowner. Would like to reduce the time that it normally takes from when the homeowner first begins to think about installing such a system and when it actually is installed and producing electricity and saving the homeowner money. So this program should reduce that time, hopefully cut it in half, if not more. And of course, the big goal is to increase the adoption of these systems throughout the town of Yarmouth. There are three main barriers that we're going to be trying to overcome. As I mentioned, cost. And what we have here is a group purchase model. The idea being, since we're going to present a lot of potential customers to this one solar installer, they can give us a much better competitive price on the installation. And also, as I sort of got to with the complexity of the whole process, our volunteer team working with the Clean Energy Center and one of their technical consultants have vetted the two installers that we have selected from a number of proposals that we have gotten. And the pricing that will be offered is going to be completely transparent and fixed. Inertia. A lot of people have been thinking, I think, in terms of installing PV for quite a bit of time, and they just haven't gotten around to doing anything. So this program, which is a limited time offer, it's going to probably last, it'll certainly last through the calendar year, maybe into early next spring. But at any rate, it will be a limited time offer, and folks are going to have to decide once and for all whether they're going to go for it or not. And it would be a shame if they lost out on the attractive deals that we're going to be offering. Also, once one or two people within Yarmouth get these installed, working with our contractors, the neighbor-to-neighbor communication between them and their neighbors is going to really increase the number of installations we should have. Another part of the warrant is home energy audits. These are being offered by Cape Light Compact, and basically there are a lot. This has been offered for quite a number of years. I've actually had them come to my house 2 different occasions, probably dating back as far 5 years ago and maybe 2 years ago. But there are a lot of homes within Yarmouth that have not taken advantage of this free program offered by Cape Light Compact. It's free to the homeowners because whether you realize it or not, your electric bill every month is paying for this program. There's a very small charge on your electric bill. If you scrutinize it, you'll be able to see it there. I don't know, it's on the order of mils per kilowatt hour, I think. But at any rate, so it's not that just that Cape Light Compact or an Eversource and everything are doing this from the goodness of their heart. They've been paid for it. So we should take advantage of it. And a lot of it has to do with, I know I had them come into my house and replace all my old incandescent light bulbs with LED lighting free of charge to me. They did a pressure test on the home to determine whether or not it was leaky and whether I need to seal windows to get better windows. Fortunately, mine was determined to be so tight that if we had more than 2 people living in the house, they would have suggested somehow I open it up a little. Those are the kinds of things they look at. They make recommendations on upgrading appliances. Of course, those you would have to buy for yourself, but they do offer programmable thermostats and insulation. And when I was looking at the insulation, I think I did actually have them add some to my attic for which I got like a 75% reduction in the price. For a while, they were actually offering that now. If you needed additional insulation, it was 100% cost-free to the homeowner. That may have expired, or it may be running through the end of this year. I don't recall at the moment. At any rate, it's a great program. Everybody should take advantage of it. We're also going to be encouraging the transition to electric vehicles. I was able to work with the Registry of Motor Vehicles and got a list of the number of electric vehicles that were currently in the town of Yarmouth. And I think I got a list of about 120, which is not that very many, but what we're looking at, the governor had set a number for the state as far as the number of electric vehicles he wanted to see in the state by the year 2030, I think. And as I looked at that, I think had made a determination that based on Yarmouth's population, for them to do their fair share, they should have 1,000 electric vehicles running around in the town of Yarmouth. So that's one of the goals of the Energy Committee, is to reach that particular threshold by the year 2030.
Mr. Duffy, if
Yes.
I can just have you try to stay to your presentation. We have a number of them tonight, so we don't want to
Okay,
go
I
off.
think I just have
Thank you very much.
2 more pages. As I mentioned, we're not only addressing homeowners, we're addressing small business here. A lot of the same savings available to the homeowner are available to our small businesses in town. And as I say, I like to call this inspiring energy sustainability, which comes out of the Yarmouth Energy Committee, their vision for a strong and prosperous town powered by clean, affordable, and secure energy, with a mission to inspire energy sustainability throughout the town. And also, all of this is built on our 3 core principles of affordability, reduced environmental impact, and consumer choice. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So the second article on the warrant, we don't actually have the warrant yet, so we're not sure what order they're in, but would direct the town when we replace electric vehicles, when we replace vehicles or add to the town's vehicle fleet, that the default decision should be to choose electric vehicles if there's a suitable model. And I believe Jim Wolf is here with us, who's the Director of Sustainability at Cape Air, and for the last 10 years plus has been managing that business's choices about energy use, and is a Yarmouth resident, and pleased to ask Jim to talk about this article.
So Mr. Duffy, if you could stop sharing your screen.
Okay, I seem to have lost a lot of my screen. The only thing I see is a little thing over here on the right. I don't see the bottom part any longer.
Let me do that for you.
Okay, I got it. I've got it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Mr.
What I
Wolf,
do,
do you have
just-
something you'd like to share? If we could unmute you first, Mr. Wolf, that would be helpful.
Okay, am I off the share screen?
You are, sir.
Thank
You
you.
are now.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. It's great to be here at the Finance Committee of my town. I live in Yarmouth and I work in Hyannis, Barnstable. And you know, this bylaw, this is a bylaw. And basically what it's getting at is the town should always look towards those things that achieve actually the goal, a lot of the goals that Mike talked about. As far as electric vehicles, you know, I'm right in the thick of it. Cape Air in 2012 introduced the first electric vehicle on Nantucket. We worked with the town and a couple of nonprofits to get the first 6 charging stations installed on the island. 3 of them were at the airport. And we ran the very first in 2012. There was only 1 car available. Just to show you how fast this transition to electric propulsion is going. in 2012, we were pretty much commanded to buy a Nissan Leaf, which we went through 2 of them on 3-year leases, and they performed very well on the cobblestones. We had no problems with them whatsoever mechanically, even though if something did go wrong, we would have had to bring them back to Hyannis. So we know that these things perform very well. I would say that there's probably over 100 vehicles available now. And the state does have a list of different kinds of cars that are available that are allowed to be purchased under the state. So what this is really about is, short of declaring a climate emergency, which the town of Yarmouth is already so up to speed on so much stuff, that I think that we have demonstrated as a town that we are on this. So what this bylaw does is it sort of codifies the process in terms of buying vehicles for the town. And to me, the significant thing in it is that it would require, when you're, say you're the head of the police department, you're working your budget, you need a few new vehicles, or the DPW, whatever vehicle need it is in whichever department, this would require that the process of looking for the vehicles include a search to see if there are any appropriate first fully electric vehicles. And of course, in that case, your department head would have to understand that electric vehicles need to be fueled differently. So you'd have to look at the charging stations. And then secondly, if there was no electric vehicle available in that category, then to drop down to the idea of a hybrid electric vehicle, which they are also much more efficient. I will say that we've learned, so from the standpoint of the Finance Committee, what we're really talking about is something that the department head or whoever is in charge of putting that on their wish list would actually have to do some kind of written submission along with their budget request, or I'm not exactly sure how that would work, but basically they'd have to explain why they couldn't do it. So in terms of process, that's a really wonderful thing, because it's not dependent on who happens to be the town manager at that moment or anything like that. It simply becomes embedded into the process during the transition period, because presumably in 5 to 10 years, we won't, first of all, Cape Air will be flying electric planes, but secondly, there won't be much available in the gasoline market. And this is really for the transitional period that all of the people who are procuring, we'd like to see every decision in town be, yes, you're looking at the financials of it, but you're also looking at, within that context of not making a bad buy for the town, you're looking at, how is the town achieving these energy reduction goals? So, what I can say is that in addition to the Leafs that we ran, we have a policy for giving rebates from the company to employees. And we did not, when we implemented that policy, tell every employee that when they buy a car, they have to write to Cape Air and tell us why they didn't buy an electric car. But in this case, that's a joke. But we have had 14 takers, and they're all reporting back to me on the economies of the cars. And some of them have had them for over 2 years. And they're extremely economical. There are no oil changes. There are no, the sort of maintenance that is standard at town, where the cars have to come in and they have to be checked and they have to, all that stuff sort of recedes quite a bit. And so the cost analysis, which is being done by lots of organizations, there's a lot of data out there. I'm sort of supporting the idea that this is the time to do this, because certainly when this bylaw becomes impactful, which is January 1st of next year, there will be quite a selection, and we don't want our town to miss out on the economics of these cars, and also the energy reduction of these cars. So, any questions that you may have, fine. I would say the finance committee chiming in on this is relative, positively on this is really that there's not an impact because there's not a negative financial impact because in both cases, whether you buy electric or whether you buy hybrid, you could opt out of buying either of those because the economies don't work or because there's not a vehicle that fits the class. So we'd love it if the finance committee would give a thumbs up to this as we go into town meeting. And as I say, what it really requires is take a look at these vehicles. And if you don't think you can buy one in your next vehicle purchase, Mr. or Ms. Department Head, then please explain why. So that's what it amounts to. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Jim?
Yes, I have one. Jim, what's an electric charging station run?
You mean the cost of it?
Yeah, like say the town goes to this and they need to put in charging stations. How much should they allow for a charging station?
Well, again, one thing, thanks for the question. One thing about the transitional period here that we've certainly learned at Cape Air is if you get in at the right time, it's not easy to put a dollar figure on it because there are very many different types of charging stations. And, they run from ones where you get a lot of information back, simple to complex. But the key factor I would say is that like at Cape Air, we installed 8 of them. We got them for free under a state program. If not, we would have been paying like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a piece for them.
So the state currently substantially subsidizes the cost of municipalities installing charging capacity. So AAA will tell you that electric vehicles now cost roughly the same as conventional vehicles for the average consumer. The town has the advantage of a number of programs which essentially subsidize our access both to solar PV production, in which our effective cost of electric power is much less, and charging capacity relative to the average consumer. So our effective cost is much less. So that we believe that the cost of transitioning to an electric fleet is actually going to cut the effective cost of maintaining the town's vehicle fleet.
And I would also say there's quite a bit of funding still available for the actual purchase of the car. They are being incentivized too. So you've got incentivized charging infrastructure, you've got incentivized cars, and you've got a lot of choices in the cars. So when you wrap it all up, now's the time to act. Plus we get to learn, we get to learn, and certainly charging stations, which aren't particularly mentioned in this bylaw, that would be, that has to be looked at by the town at the same time, because you don't want to buy an electric car and then not have a place to charge it. But they're highly subsidized now. The Volkswagen money is still there. The state programs to assist municipalities are strong in this. I mean, for instance, Martha's Vineyard just electrified their bus fleet under this program. So, there's a lot of good things happening that we ought to get on in this area and just keep on.
And
Thank you.
We're going to need to be attentive to the sort of opportunities. Our colleagues in the Chatham Energy Committee flagged for us that they figured out that while the tax credits that are available federally aren't available, obviously, to the town, Chatham wound up leasing their vehicles from a taxable entity. So they got the price benefit of the tax incentives indirectly through a buying strategy.
Jim, I have a question. Oh, Steph, you have a question first.
Yeah, Jim, nice to see you. So thank you for explaining. I'm just confused, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know if there are any lawyers on the call, but I'm reading the language and it says exception for emergency procurement of motor vehicles. the town administrator may authorize the purchase of a conventional motor vehicle by an instrumentality of the town if he or she determines, so Bob determines, that an emergency exists, which requires the immediate purchase of the motor vehicle, and that it is not feasible to complete the procurement of a zero emission vehicle within the time frame required by such emergency. So I don't see any exception of if it's not economically feasible written as written. Am I missing something?
So I'm actually the retired lawyer draftsperson of this.
Great.
And there are a couple of different exceptions. One is that if the cost would materially exceed, meaning by more than 5%, what it would cost to buy a conventional vehicle, there's an exemption. The other is if there's no vehicle which is capable of serving the functions required, because we realize that the town has a wide range of vehicle needs. I think right now, a lot of communities are buying police cruisers that are electric, but there's probably no fire truck yet that meets the needs. There's probably a lot of construction equipment the town runs for which there's not yet a functionally useful electric equivalent. So the two qualifications are, it's not mandated if the department determines that the cost of the electric vehicle would be materially more than a conventional vehicle. It's not required if there's not a usable vehicle for the purpose that the town's buying it for. So that we did anticipate that this will be a transition over time. Hopefully in a few years, there'll be electric versions of every category of town vehicle, but there aren't yet equivalents for everything.
I'm sorry, can you show me where it says that if there's a 5% differential? Because I'm not seeing that.
So that's section 2F, materially exceeds, and in section 3A, the priority,
Okay,
one of the
I see.
exceptions is if it is likely that the total lifetime cost of the zero emission vehicle would materially exceed the total lifetime cost of a conventional motor vehicle.
I see. Okay.
So the heart of this is we're encouraging the town to think long-term, not just the upfront sticker price, but what's the lifetime cost of the vehicle. I bought my first EV 2 years ago. The only maintenance cost I've had so far is tire rotation. There's nothing to do with an electric vehicle. It doesn't take much maintenance. So both the cost of fueling it, which is electricity rather than gas, and the efficiency of an electric motor, and the lack of any routine maintenance needs offset a fair amount of the difference in sticker price.
Okay.
So we're asking that the town look at the lifetime cost of its decisions rather than the first year sticker price.
Well, yeah, and I think I get the idea behind it, and I'm just trying to make sure that we just don't put ourselves into a situation where we have to, buy something that that we can't afford. But the lifetime cost thing, that is good, to bear in mind. Does the lifetime cost of the vehicle include the charging stations?
Yes, I would say it has to.
Okay.
But it's across the whole fleet, obviously. And
So I would love to see any kind of, whether it's from you all or, I don't know if Ed or anyone else has any data about just how much it would cost to equip the town. I know you mentioned that there was funding that you could potentially go for, but generally, what the cost would be to the town. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I want to know what the costs are for equipping with the stations. And I'd like also to see just sort of maybe some examples. I think that would also be helpful. The last question that I have, and again, this is a legal question, is, and maybe this is something one of the Bobs would know, does this supersede the state procurement laws about having to go for the lowest bid? or attempt to supersede it, in which case it would be state law would supersede.
This is Bob Rittenauer. I'm speaking, and I just want to be clear that you can't supersede the state law with a local bylaw. So
Right, that's what I meant.
any tie goes to the state, and so I guess that would answer that.
You know, yeah, I concur with that. I mean, but I don't think it's an attempt to override the procurement rules. The state would have to tell us whether a conventional and an electric vehicle are treated as identical for purposes of bidding if the long-term costs of the electric vehicle are lower. And given that the state's just adopted a new law which calls for a major reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, I think the answer would be that you could look at the long-term cost and not simply the upfront sticker price.
I'm just flagging it that sometimes we can do things on the local level and then have them run up against state laws, and we should know the answer to that question, especially if it comes up at town meeting. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jim, I have a question. You had mentioned, and maybe this is a little bit beyond the scope of this article. I just wanted to pick your brain on it. You had said that in 5 to 10 years, you thought the internal combustion engine would probably be not something that we see a lot of. Is there any thoughts in your committee, and in general, we hear lots about our aging infrastructure and our power usage. Is there any concern if we flip the switch and all of a sudden we had electric vehicles running rampant, which would be great, that's the goal of what we're trying to do or what you're trying to do, does the infrastructure provide enough capability to charge all these cars? I know we have trouble now, and I also know that power plants aren't popping up all over the Northeast, they're going away. Any thoughts to that?
So that's one of the two, biggest things that are being worked on, is the sense that if you snapped your fingers and every car was electric and every bus was electric and every vehicle was electric and every airplane was electric, we wouldn't have enough electricity. So from that standpoint, there's a lot of upgrading of the grid that is related to the fact that much charging happens at night. There's every regulatory stuff that has to happen in terms of the pricing of electricity and the demand pricing of electricity, because these charging stations, increase the demand at that moment when they go on more than turning on some lights. So that there's no, the people that I've been working with, like at Cape Air, it's also a problem because airports don't have the ability to charge. So at the same time as all these aircraft are being developed, there's a great big conversation about how is the charging going to work. In terms of the technology of the actual cars, are they suddenly are they going to be rejected by the market? So, if you look at what's happened in charging infrastructure across the country for, basically personal vehicles, the growth is astronomical. It's just like the curve is unbelievable. How many charging stations there were a while ago? I would say the bigger issue is probably not the installation of charging stations anymore, and certainly for the town, that can be easily taken care of. But, this is why vineyard wind is important, for instance. This is why the growth of the wind industry is, because we don't really want to see this transition happen if it means we have to reopen a lot of coal and oil and dirty plants again. But I'd say it's like any transition that's happened throughout our history. There's nothing that, and I'm talking to the people at Renewable Energy Labs. There is very little pessimism that this can be done. Okay. And so from the standpoint of the town and the number of vehicles and the amount of electricity that goes in there, I see why you said it's sort of outside of the scope. It's a big conversation. I'm going to 3 or 4 big, seminars a week practically on this transition in aviation. And, you know, as far as this bylaw, no, I think the town can go ahead without any worry about it at all. As far as the major transition, it's extremely exciting. It's extremely prioritized right now. And everybody is just engineering problem that can be solved. You know?
Right. I think my concern, and we're not going to spend much more time on this. My concern is the cost analysis is using some dollar amount assumed to generate electricity to power these cars. And, you know, it's kind of like in the 70s when everyone switched to electric heat at one point because electric heat was so cheap. And why wouldn't you do it? And then lo and behold, we laugh when you hear about someone buying a house with electric heat on Cape Cod because it's the most expensive thing ever. It's hard to get a cost into the future if the grid gets taxed and energy costs skyrocket more than the cost of an internal combustion engine. That's hard to put a handle on.
Yeah, and I won't belabor it too much either, but the technology, like if you look at the price for which Vineyard Wind has sold its first tranche of energy at, that's not, it's actually less. You know, it was a very low price. And speaking about the future, you know, in terms of the kilowatt hour and how much it's going to cost, there's a little bit of a leap of faith. But what I would maintain is that, you know, over the last 10 years since I've been at Cape Air, the cost of aviation fuel, which is our second largest expense, has varied between over $5 and a little, you know, maybe $2.50. So the price fluctuations in energy are going to happen whether you're even when you increase the demand, we also have a tremendous potential to increase the supply. Both things are transitioning right now, the technology of supply and this technology. So there's a certain amount of faith that goes into it. But I will say this, electric propulsion is so much more efficient than the internal combustion engine that, you know, if you stand back from it and you say, which would you rather have? Something that's extremely efficient at moving weight, whether it's in the air, you know, moving stuff. Which would you rather have in terms of the efficiency of the conversion of the battery or the gas to the power, the foot-pounds? This is the way to go. It's like 3 times more efficient, and you don't have all that lost heat that you have in an internal combustion engine. Yes, there's a certain amount of leap of faith.
I yesterday I needed to complete a pro forma of what we thought the Solarize installation on a rooftop in Yarmouth would cost over time. And I was using a 2% inflation rate for what I assumed utility bills would move over the next 25 years. And our technical consultants hired by the state, Cadmus, told me that the Energy Information Administration, which is the federal agency responsible for figuring out future electricity rates, estimates that over the next 25 years, the rate of inflation in electric utility costs is 0.3%, which astonished me, and I'm frankly skeptical about. But the consensus is that the trend is actually downward in the rate of inflation in the cost of electricity. I assume that's because of the increasing supply of renewables on the supply side. But the grid issue you're flagging is real, but it's pretty clear that at the federal level, the government is paying attention and is planning to put a good deal of funding into solving the problem of how do you move the electrons from where they're produced to where they're needed. That's a critical obstacle to the economy, but I don't think it's been missed by the folks who have the money to solve it.
Yeah, one last piece on that, and that shocked me too when Barry got that data, because I've been doing these pro formas that are based on how much money would you save if you avoid the cost of future electricity. You know, if you put up a solar system, you make your bill go down, your imported electricity from the grid goes down to zero. And you know, the big killer on this is that there's no fuel cost in generating the power if it's coming from the sun or the wind. The predictions that Barry just mentioned from the pros are a lot of it is based on the fact that there's no drilling, there's no refining, there's none of that stuff. There's just placing equipment where it can capture what is available to all of us. And that's one of the reasons I think they're predicting that once we have the economies of scale in building like wind farms and huge solar fields and stuff like that. Once we have those economies of scale and the pricing of the equipment is going to go down, 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 just like Barry is so pissed and clenching his fists about the fact that I'm going to get my solar system through Solarize for half what he paid. You know, the same thing is what's projected in this area. You know, that we're going to get up to speed and it's going to be cheap electricity.
Okay.
So if I can suggest that we move on to the third article.
You need to move on, please.
The third is in some ways simpler. It's the same principle that the town should look at the long-term costs and benefits when it does procurement. This is about building projects. And it was actually suggested to us by Dan Knapnick over a year ago. I think out of frustration that the DPW project was designed without really pausing long enough to think about the energy consumption issues, and suggested that in the future, when the town starts designing a public building project, it should look at energy efficiency. And part of the design services contract should be a requirement that the designer assess what it would look like to have a net zero energy consumption design. It doesn't require that the town choose that design, but it requires that when we go out for design services, part of the process is tell us how much it would cost and how much it would save over the long-term life of the building to design upfront an energy efficient building. So that's things like when you figure out the site, where is the building on the site? Do the windows face south? So you have passive solar heating, and then you screen them in the summer to reduce the heating effect. Is the roof pitched so that you can take advantage of the maximum potential solar PV capacity? Do you install air source heat pumps for heating and cooling so you don't need oil or gas to provide heating? Do you insulate the building? Do you buy the most efficient windows and doors? You do basically the stuff that now Cape Light Compact is going out to businesses and homes and having people retrofit buildings to be more energy efficient. What would it cost to make the most efficient building so that the town, when it decides which design to pick, has the information? Again, it doesn't prescribe that the town's got to choose the zero emissions option. And my guess is over the next few years, it's still not going to be feasible to do that. But it requires that we know upfront in every building project, what's the cost and benefit of each energy efficiency enhancement you could do in a design, so that you're thinking about it from the beginning of siting a building and figuring out how to put the pieces together.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do, Brian. Well, let me raise it then. Could you just give me an insight into what percentage of generating capacity currently is carbon-based and where we will reasonably expect to be in 10 years in terms of the percentage of generating capacity that's carbon-based?
Well, the legislature just enacted a law that specified where we're supposed to be in 10 years. I'm trying to think about whether I know the number off the top of my head. I think it was a 50% reduction in the portion of electric generating capacity that is carbon-based.
All right,
But,
so we're at 80, that gets us down to 40, so that's not,
yeah, so, but this is going to be driven by public policy. You know,
Oh,
the
really?
technology is available to scale up wind and solar power enormously. The rate at which that happens is going to be driven by the decisions, honestly, that the Congress makes in the next 3 months, probably.
Well, that was my second question, actually. What do we know about plans to incorporate either, grant money or tax credits for emphasizing these kinds of energy generating capacity or distribution or, anything we've talked about? Do we know what's to be expected? I mean, you seem to be part of this conversation, so I wonder if you know what.
Well, I'm familiar with what the administration's program is, which involves a combination of higher requirements for, it's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which requires that utilities rapidly increase the portion of their generating capacity that comes from renewable sources, which the state actually just significantly increased in the bill that just passed, and tax credits to increase the economics, basically, for wind and solar, which are the heart of the Biden proposal for infrastructure that are meant to dramatically increase the rate at which wind and solar get expanded. There's probably no technical barrier to virtually limitless expansion of those technologies, but the economics, while they're rapidly improving, I mean, as Jim mentioned, I paid $4.10 a watt for my solar panels in 2018. The deal that we just made with SolarWolf to install solar for Yarmouth homeowners this year is $2.43 a watt, which means that almost any homeowner who's interested in solar is actually going to make money the first month the system turns on. So the economics in the real market are changing rapidly. The extent to which tax credits support it is going to further accelerate it. But these are obviously huge questions beyond the capacity of the town to control, but both the state and federal governments are rapidly moving on policy to accelerate the transition.
Jim, I see you have your hand up, and I'd like to have this be the last comment for this article, please.
So, George, it's a really good question. And, all I can say is public policy over the last 10 years made it possible to decrease the cost. So we paid $5.12 in 2010. We just completed a system where the price was $2.60, let's say. So that's over a decade, and that's per installed watt of solar. And that's because of public policy. In 2010, we received from state and federal 1.1 million, and this is a private company, to build a $1.4 million system. In our most recent system, we didn't get anything from the state upfront or the feds upfront. So public policy is really working in this area. That would, if that can allay any of the fears, as long as we keep on the same track.
No, I want to at least acknowledge that I think it was 10 years ago, I put solar panels on my roof, and they, I paid a lot for those panels, but they amortized much faster than the installer ever said they would. Everything I've done since, I've used Cape-Light Compact twice. I recommend it to everybody I can. So I'm a big proponent, but I guess I don't want us to get out ahead of ourselves if in the end we're putting all of these, let's say, recharging stations and going to all electric, if the vast majority of the generating capacity that's going to provide that electricity is still fossil fueled. And I'm not so sure I'm hearing that from anything anybody's saying here today. But I don't know the facts either. This is not my strong suit. So
I mean, the fundamental premise for strategic electrification, which is the broad category of we should convert vehicles, heating systems to electricity, is that over time, the portion of the electric supply that is renewable is going to steadily increase. And hopefully public policy will drive that to accelerate, but that it is already better than burning oil and gas and coal, and it will get better and better. But the issue you're flagging is real, and we obviously all depend on it moving as quickly as feasible.
We have one more comment and then we're going to bring this to a conclusion. Stephanie, please.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again for your presentation. I believe hopefully before we have a chance to, vote on it, we'll have a chance to talk with town staff a little bit more about their thoughts. But I do have one question, well, maybe it's not so much a question so much as a suggestion. With regards to the first article that you're petitioning, I think it might be a great idea to go before the Old Kings Highways District as well, because there, I live on 6A, and I think solar panels are pretty, but they don't. And I think kind of getting that idea out and educating them would also be really helpful. So that's all. Thank you.
Working on it.
We are really working on it.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for the presentation. Very informative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We really appreciate it. I did want to make one kind of comment. I believe Mike did not get the plaid memo this evening, so you should coordinate a little bit better with the terms. Just saying. Thank you again, gentlemen. So the next petitioner, Pat, are you going to let her in?
Sorry, sir. Would you like to deal with the plastic water bottle first and then move on?
Yes, please.
I'm bringing in Madhavi Venkasan, who is presenting tonight, and has been, oh, that's Joyce. Where's Madhavi? There you are, Madhavi. You're all set.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Would you like to share a screen, Madhavi?
No, I think by this time you've seen the slides in the past, and the slides aren't any different. So I'm just going to speak to the commercial single-use plastic water bottle ban, the initiative, and the rationale for it. And to some extent, it touches on some of the things that the previous speakers actually noted. And I'm hoping that you'll offer me any questions you have, and I can answer them for you. So first of all, I just want to provide a little background on who I am, because I think it might be helpful to you. So my name is Madhavi Venkatesan. I'm the founder and executive director of Sustainable Practices. We are a 501c3 organization located here on Cape Cod. And in 2019, we initiated the municipal single-use plastic water bottle, the municipal bottle ban. They're now getting confusing for me. The municipal plastic bottle ban, which you basically passed on town meeting floor in Yarmouth in the fall of 2019. Last year, due to COVID, this particular article was postponed until this spring. And this is the commercial single-use plastic water bottle ban. This actually governs retail sale of single-use plastic water bottles of less than 1 gallon in size, non-carbonated, non-flavored drinking water, which means basically it competes against tap. This particular ban article was passed, the exact language, in Provincetown, Wellfleet, Eastham, Orleans, Brewster, Harwich, and Falmouth in the fall of 2020. So we have 7 towns that have already adopted it. It is presently filed in Dennis, Yarmouth, Chatham, and Sandwich. And most of these are related to COVID in terms of the postponement. The particular article that we have on the floor with you is related to something that we believe municipal government has a tremendous opportunity to push forward, especially on the scale that we're looking at, which is the 15 towns that comprise Cape Cod. at a time when there is limited leadership on a national scale with regard to environmental needs and our understanding of the coexistence and actually the necessity of human existence on the environment, plastic bottles give us a potential tangible element that almost everyone has come into contact with, whether it is a petroleum-based product or something that's called now a bio-based plastic product. It is a high resource intensive product, which costs more in terms of its production than that $1 or $1.50 or $2 that it is sold for. It has a 5-10 minute use life. And during that time, it actually secretes through the plastic itself as synthetic estrogens, as well as other chemicals into the beverage, which means that people who drink it are normalizing every day for us the issues that we contend with as an American society, from ADHD, fertility disruption, endocrine disease, and obesity, as well as cardiovascular disease. These are all directly tied to plastics. There are limitations to science because you actually need replication in order to be able to prove conclusively. Now we can wait until we're all pretty much in ailment in order for that conclusivity to exist, or we can use some amount of common sense in conjunction with science and recognize that the normalization of these issues has increased tremendously over the 45-year use life of plastic. But then when we look at disposal, this is where perhaps the Finance Committee can chime in the most from the standpoint of the cost of disposal of plastic for the town, given the fact that there is no commodity market for plastic, and there probably will never be, but also taking into consideration that alternatives do have a commodity value, alternatives being things such as aluminum, which there are aluminum canned water in the event that there is a need for that. But really the other element here is a concept of water justice, which is just only emerging in terms of the terminology. And actually we've adopted and created that name ourselves. What that refers to is the fact that when you buy tap water that has been bottled in the grocery store, you're reducing it to a transaction. And you're not necessarily thinking about where that water is coming from. You're basically depleting another community's water resource that's been easily depleted by corporations due to loopholes that exist in terms of the ability to take out municipal water from other locations. And you're not taking into consideration managing your own. So this is a really big issue, this water resource element, the desire to actually take control of your own water resources, to take over responsibility of managing those resources, and also have cognizance that your usage of resources should not come at the cost of a fellow neighbor. So those are the essential elements related to this. But then when we go to disposal, there are 3 basic elements or 3 different channels for disposal. One is landfilling, which is still the dominant mechanism. And as an economist, I really find it very disheartening that we consider progress to be the production of goods that we eventually dig a hole to bury. The other aspect is that we also can incinerate them, which basically transforms a toxic element into something that we breathe, which is another issue. And the final element is actually that it's just being so-called recycled, but recycling of plastic bottles essentially is downcycling, which means that it ends up being another product, such as decking or clothing, which means it ends up in our water systems by a different mechanism. So that's essentially the rationale for this particular ban. This is not the beginning. This is not the end. This is a learning opportunity for people to start taking into consideration the life cycle assessment of their purchasing decisions. This is increasingly becoming a mechanism that's being channeled across the globe. It's going to take a little while because it means that we also have to recognize that our current purchasing choices, purchasing decisions are made on a price basis where prices externalize the cost to future generations and our own health most of the time. So we really need to think in terms of prices, what is being captured and what is it that's being basically pushed down to another time period. And we have to actually decide for ourselves in each community whether we want to be so myopic to make our decisions based on only the market values that don't take into consideration the adverse consequences, or we want to finally take responsibility for future generations, excuse me. So thank you very much. That was just all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Stephanie.
Nice to see you, Stephanie. It's
Hi,
been a long
nice to see you too, Madavi. Thank you for your presentation. So
The communities that you mentioned who passed this, what alternatives are being sold in convenience stores and whatnot in those communities, like glass bottles, the weird cardboard ones, like
Yeah.
how is the market responding in those communities?
The reality is a majority of merchants see this is coming, and also given the fact that we're in a coastal community, the biggest issue for most of these merchants face is the disconnect between their own revenue generation and the need to preserve the community that they actually are doing business in. And there's an inherent inconsistency with using plastic. We did not see any kind of issues with small retailers whatsoever. In fact, many of them stood up on town meeting floor advocating for this particular ban. So we do think that most people understand fundamentally that there is a revenue trade-off. Obviously, there will be, but that the revenue trade-off is very insignificant given the overall costs and burdens to our community in general. And also, one other element that could be emerging, especially if this becomes Cape-wide, is the emerging brand premium that we have as a Cape by showing that we are really willing to be an example of an environmentally focused community.
Okay. But just to be clear for my fellow committee members, there are other
Yes, yes,
other ways that you can buy water.
Yes,
that
yes. Let me,
isn't plastic.
yeah, there is one firm. It's called Open Water specifically, and I bring them up because I don't know how many of you are aware, but aluminum cans all have a very thin, like hairline thin, plastic lining in them. And so what you want to make sure is if you're actually going to have a plastic lining that it's BPA free, because that's one of the issues. BPA is actually regulated for infants and toddlers, even though it does have issues for adults as well over a excessive amount of contact because it builds up in your system. But that particular can of water, Open Water, is BPA free. It's available. Many merchants across the Cape, as well as on Martha's Vineyard, have switched over to that canned water. Glass water from Saratoga Springs to other brands have been already here on the Cape for a while. But the one thing that we all need to take into consideration, and I'm just going to open this discussion up, is even when you look at glass is not recycled into new glass bottles. That stopped when we got rid of the deposit years ago, where Coca-Cola would come and pick up their own glass bottles, clean them, and then resell the product in them. Glass is actually probably very guilty of being downcycled. And we have a partner organization right now in Goa, India. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this location, but it's very similar to the Cape in the sense it's a coastal community. It's also one that's has a large tourist base, but they incinerate a lot of their glass right now. And this is something that we've already noted from the incineration of plastic. Some of the ambient plastic that we face may be due directly to the incineration process. So in other words, it goes up into the upper atmosphere, recombines, and comes down. That's what they're noticing is happening in Goa with regard to glass. So I'm bringing this up because I really would hope that we would start to think a little bit more broadly about the whole life cycle impact of whatever we choose to do in terms of our consumption choices, and look for basically reuse and refuse as our primary objectives. And when we need to have something, find that alternative that has a lowest environmental footprint. Basically, aluminum cans can be recycled fairly indefinitely into new aluminum cans.
Okay. Thank you. And then my other question is your group doing anything to push towns in the direction of installing water refilling units, which I know nobody's going to use right now because it's COVID, but one day it's going to not be COVID, right? And so I think my concern is just you got to give people an option to get water, right? Like, and I bring my refillable water bottle most of the time. Sometimes I forget it. I want to be able to have an option to be able to buy it somewhere, so I don't have to buy soda or something else, right? And like we need to be able to provide people with ability to get water somehow that's not like a gross tap from a sink.
The reality is that there were drinking fountains that existed for a very long time until a marketing scheme related to selling water took off so strongly in this country. So we are pushing for a readaptation of municipal water sources to be available through refilling stations. In many communities, the communities themselves have taken upon themselves, and I know that Pat has been a strong advocate of that here, so I would, if I can defer to her to speak on that specifically to Yarmouth, I'd greatly appreciate it. But I can speak to a couple of communities just to give you an example. In Provincetown, they have regular set aside funds annually to continue to increase their number of refill stations that are available in Provincetown. In Brewster, they have pushed and advocated for a communications program called Drink Brewster Tap, which I believe is being copied on a Cape-wide level of Drink Cape Tap. So part of it is that, but the other part is also unlearning the fallacies that marketing has sort of taught over the last generation and a half, that you need to constantly be hydrated. You know, just speaking from that perspective, I think the majority of people in this room have been around long enough to remember a time when we were not told that we had to be hydrated all the time. Though our bodies are made of 60% water, we don't need to replenish it hourly. So part of this is also a false perception that we've been taught based on marketing more than anything else. And it's time that we start to become more cognizant that we have the ability to think for ourselves and can start to think to ourselves, does this marketing make sense? I really would hope for the future, period, point blank, exclamation mark, that we start to be a little bit more critical with regard to a lot of the things that we think we need, but we really don't. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, hearing none. Madhavi, we really appreciate you coming in this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Pat, we have one more, I believe.
We do. Madhavi, thank you very much. It's good to see you.
Thank you. It was very nice to see you. Thank you for everything you've done.
No problem. Last participant to join us this evening will be Tom Barron. Tom is a member of the planning committee, but this initiative, I mean the planning board, but this initiative is on his own. And he is speaking of the petitioned article to solarize the links course on the landfill to generate new revenues in order to support capital projects here within the town. Tom, I'm going to share you as a, and bring you in as a co-host so you can share your video.
And Pat, just a point of clarification. I don't recall seeing these last two copies of these articles emailed separately. I think originally I remember seeing this last one on an earlier draft of the warrant, but are we going to get follow-up copies, or did I just miss something in my email?
Madhavi's request came to me in the body of an email, and when I had attached it, it didn't open up within the share screen, so I can send you that. And then Tom has a PowerPoint, and I didn't have his exact petition, but I'll get that to you.
Thanks.
Tom, you should be all set to share as a co-host, so you can bring your PowerPoint forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the committee. I'm going to bring my, yeah, there you go. Okay, the two,
I'm sorry, Tom, we're not seeing your screen yet. If you could share screen and put that forward, you should be able to do that as a co-host, but at the moment we're not seeing it.
all right, just a moment.
Absolutely.
I only have join the meeting. I don't have their share screen. All right, I got it. You see it now?
There you are, Tom. That's great. There you go. Just
Okay.
start your program, put, slideshow and have it start. It's not in its normal format. So go into slideshow, click slideshow and then start it on a full screen. There you are. There you go.
Okay. Okay, the previous petitions that you've been discussing are much more structured than mine. I say it this way because what I'm trying to discuss here is an idea. And the idea is that we need to find a way to generate more money for income for the town. And this started with, as you can see on the screen, I started with a much bigger area, 100 acres. I had to cut that down to 55. And I had 400 kilowatts per acre potential production. And that had to be cut down in half. So my original idea has been drastically reduced. But even so, there's the potential of $3.6 million annually benefit to the town. Now, when I say this is an idea, there are a lot of pieces in this idea that need to come together. And that is why I've asked only for a study. In other words, the town, I would assume the selectmen through their process would appoint a committee to investigate this. The reason I'm saying it as a citizen, I've tried to make some inquiries at the state level and local level and et cetera. And as a citizen, without the backing of a status of a committee, it makes it very difficult to get anywhere. So the study is what's important. And the idea is based primarily on the capital budget that has been announced. This is back for about 2 or 3 years ago. But the potential burden for the town is in the $150 to $200 million. And when you look at $1 million of municipal debt obligation divided by 10,000 households, you're looking at $100 per household per year. And at current, the list that I showed earlier, and you see it on the right side, when you amortize all of those different pieces, you could be as much as $7.89 million or roughly $800 on the tax rolls starting out at the very beginning. It tapers off like all mortgage payments would, but nevertheless, it's still a hell of a burden for the town. Now, one of the things that has been done with the wastewater plan has been a scheme has been developed to, the blue bars are the annual expenses that are expected on this is the first phase of the wastewater. And the scheme to pay for the first phase of wastewater are the red bars. And as you see, there's a little bit of surplus money that's involved. And these are the 4 categories on the right that have been cobbled together to be able to pay for the first phase of the sewer. I'll get back to this dedicated local receipts here a little bit later, but I just note it right now. Now, the effect of that plan reduced the overall capital expenditures from nearly 800 million down to about 4.78, or in other words, a $500 tax bill. That $300 reduction is substantial, and the Water Resources Committee, which I'm a member of, They put that together, and it's going to be a real benefit going down the road. But as it shows at the bottom here, there are still the extra money is still showing savings. Well, that $300 decrease in the overall tax bill is what the solar farm has the potential of doing as well. It will have its own increase in its own service debt, but it will have a much bigger income, and overall the net difference is going to result in a $200 tax bill per year. Now, these are gross numbers. These are I will be the first to admit, these are speculative numbers. I'm not guaranteeing any of these numbers are going to be accurate going forward, but that's the whole purpose of taking the time to study. Up here on the left and on the upper right, capping of the landfill for the links course was done in 1999. There was a $5.5 million cost, and it was funded through a $6 million zero interest loan. But that has been paid for on the tax bill at least $30 a year. And the last payment was June of last year. But on the left side, the Gulf Enterprise overall, both courses and the links course were underwater 40% of the 40% of the time during that same period. If the town had not accepted the financial burden of the links course, the Gulf Enterprise would never have made any money for the last 20 years. The Ed Centeo had made some inquiries about a potential solar farm on the links course a number of years ago, and the yellow outline shows where that was located. I've added the pink because I think we could take advantage of a bigger proposal. And 56 acres, excuse me, up to about a 10.5 megawatt potential. This would be about twice the size of Dennis. Now, the Energy Committee, you heard the Energy Committee had their meeting last night, and you also heard some of the input from them earlier. When you look at solar here on the Cape, a home will potentially have an offset of about $100 a month. The municipal buildings, which the Energy Committee and others have been advocating for the town or within other town governments as well, will gain approximately $1,000 a month. The Cape Cod Energy Park, which is just about ready to start, that has the potential of maybe $10,000 a month, and all of those are positive. But what I'm projecting for the solar farm is that we will can probably have $250,000 a month. And this is in contrast. I said Dennis. Dennis uses their energy is first used for their municipal buildings. To offset the municipal buildings, it offsets the water system pumping, and they also contribute to DY schools. This energy, the energy park here is one of those elements that I said is part of the wastewater payment scheme. Now, I won't go through all the words of the slides, but there are other benefits. The top line is that the Gulf Enterprise wouldn't have to have the cost of the links course. And then there are other things involved here, including the very bottom one, the idea of pickleball and splash pad, which have been controversial issues for recreation. The last slide is this, that the golf interests are not too keen on the idea of losing the links course. And I understand that. I'm not a golfer, and I have no animus against the golf people at all. But we have the potential here of making something that's very potentially helpful for the town. And I've even it's been suggested that, well, if golf is going to be willing to go along with this, need to throw them a bone. Well, the projection here shows if there was $5 million needed for a new clubhouse, it would require annual payments of somewhere in the vicinity of $336,000. That would only constitute about 1/8 of the potential solar farm income, leaving at least about $2.5 million for the benefit of the town. As it says, both the town and golf will have skin in the game. The objective, this whole petition is basically to take the time to study the potential of the solar farm and work it in. Now, the timing of the solar farm would not be able to be done before the Bass River golf course were rebuilt. And that is projected right now at the design would be complete by mid 2024. And then somewhere in the fall of 24 to spring of 26 would be the actual construction. So between now and 26, there's ample time for us to in the town to study this in quite a bit of detail. There is the potential of grant money. There are state and federal programs, none of which I have information on, and to try to get them as a citizen, it's like pulling hen's teeth. We could lease the site for others to build, or we could build the solar farm and run it and own it ourselves, which would probably be a better economic benefit to the town. There are past state agreements concerning the establishment of the links course as a recreation site. Some of that legislation would have to be overturned or substituted with another area in town. All of those issues are what I'm saying is all food for thought and subject matter for the idea of doing this as a study. So that's it in a nutshell. I do thank you for the time to present this, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody have any questions? And we really only have about 2 or 3 minutes to get through this for the sake of everyone's time here. So if we could entertain some questions, if there are any. Stephanie.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Tom. So I'm not a golfer either, so I'm not at all familiar with the area. So I just want to clarify that I'm hearing, because I don't have the petition in front of me, clearly what it would do. It would take land that is part of and adjacent to, but not planned to be used as actual golfing area, and utilize it towards, we would be studying the possibility of using it towards, you know, an electric grid. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, the links course is only about a nine hole course. It is appended to the Bayberry Hills course, managed and operated by them. I have had comments of people saying that it is very little used as a resource. It is not as actively used as it was originally intended. In other words, it is an asset within the town. It's an area asset, a physical real estate asset that could be repurposed to something that would be much more beneficial to the town than its expense and very little expense over time, and very little used by the general public. I've heard that as little as 200 people a year use the course. It just seems to me that there's a more efficient way of using a real estate asset for the town, and that's the bottom line. The whole idea of looking at the capital, in other words, unlike Dennis, which allocates their output for different purposes, my sentiment in this is that the output, the potential economic income from this would be dedicated totally toward the capital expenditures for the town.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna pause you there because I'm just trying to get a basic answer as far as the status of the actual property. So are there other ideas? Pat, that would be terrific if you could answer that.
So the project of the links course was combined with the creation of Homer Park back in 1997. And as a part of that project, CDM, who was our contractor, worked with us to secure 2 parkland grants. Park grants are funded through the Land and Water Conservation Funds through the federal government that pass through the state as park grants. So we received 2 $600,000 park grants to create both the links and the park. And because we received those grants, there's a conservation restriction for recreation purposes only placed upon the property. So if we were going to change the use of the property, we would need to go through a Article 97 process that would require us to find equal or greater value land that had the same level of recreational opportunity for the community to switch off in order to even allow other usage of that land. And we would have to refund that by between $800 and $1.2 million back to the state because we no longer are using it as a recreational asset. The other thing I'll add is that with the wastewater treatment program, as we're looking and moving forward, one of the established areas where the effluent water, which is once cleaned and goes through all of the processing, will be deposited back into the watershed would be at Bass River Golf Course, where they're going to create 2 significant cisterns and disrupt the course play and close down the course for about a year and a half. So the 18 holes plus the 9 of the links, so the 27 holes at that area, at that location, will be the only public golf available within Yarmouth, and then we'll partner with our communities to the east and west, Barnstable and Dennis. Ultimately, we will be having a mutual, I hope, agreement with them through the town so that golf will still continue during the time when we disrupt play and actually stop it at the Bass River Golf Course. So though Tom is clear in some of what he's saying, and I appreciate his efforts, I think that there's a lot of steps to be taken in order to revert the golf course, which was paid for primarily with park funds along with our own borrowing. And it will require some significant efforts to clear the state's requirements before we could go forward and use it for another purpose.
And thank you, Pat. That's very helpful. And Pat, to your knowledge, would we have to go? I've passed bills like that through the legislature, so it's home rule, it's a bit of a pain. But would we have to go through that process if we weren't taking up the entire property for something like that? Say if it was like 50% recreational, 50%.
There's something called a 10X where you take a couple of different properties and you combine them into one. And it's a move to, and I don't believe that 10X happened on these two separate properties, though they're contiguous. So we could use barriers beyond, but there's setbacks based on the highway that runs on one side and then Old Townhouse Road that runs on the other. So there would be limited amount of area to be able to put those solar farm without having to significantly change the usage of the property, and the state would expect that we would have to make those efforts to change it.
Okay, thank you.
Steph, basically, yes, what you're asking is the nature of which we need to study all of those different questions and resolve them. And as an individual, I can't give you a definitive answer. That has to come through the auspices of a town committee appointed by the selectmen. And in other words, all of these issues have to be faced. If it means changing the legislation or repayment of any of those items, those are all parts of what the study needs to resolve. And I fully understand that. And yes, without trying to be, saying this has got to be done. I'm saying this is something that would be nice to do, but we've got to be careful, and we've got time. We've got time from now until 2026 to study and come up with an answer and be able to implement it right after the Bass River Golf Course is finally back in shape.
And Tom, is there a cost associated, I would assume there is, associated with studying it and this warrant article?
Cost in the article?
Yeah, the cost of the study.
No, I did not try to identify a cost. All I'm saying is I asked for a study to be authorized by the town. And where we go from there, that's really up to the selectmen.
Okay, and is there, Pat or Bob, is there any other alternative to kind of citizens petition for town meeting for kind of petitioning for funds like this? Like, I'm not sure that CPA funds would necessarily be useful, but is there some other way of petitioning the town to take this up through a grant or just a process of determining how much it would cost and prioritizing it amongst our many other priorities for capital?
Bob, I'll always defer to you unless you want me to answer.
I guess give a stab at it. The answer would be, I don't think CPC funds could be used, but I think what Tom is suggesting is that it be a selectman committee who would then look at all the options, and then if they needed to have professional help, they'd have to have an article either in the capital budget or in a separate article to appropriate money to do some kind of an engineering study or something of that nature.
So
Yeah.
capital budget might be the way to kind of.
Yes,
Yeah.
if it's going to
Filter.
happen, once there's some preliminary work done, I guess that would be the next step. Yes.
Okay.
And I guess as
that
we
would be-
look at, Tom,
Go ahead.
I'll just add in there, Tom, to support that, as we look at the acreage and the new solar technology, I think we can get an estimate from established fields what the potential revenue stream would be. And then compare that to the cost of what we would need to refund and also commit to offset what was committed by the town. And so we could look at all those and see if that $3 million number is really realistic based on some established numbers, even locally between Bartsville and Dennis and some of the fields that exist.
Yeah, I basically agree with that, Pat and Stephanie. The idea is this is only just an idea. This is let's take the time to explore it. Let's look at all of the pluses and minuses, put them all on the table, and let's work it out. If it requires funding down the road, I don't have the ability to project that at this time. But if the selectmen, if the town agrees to do the study, and the selectmen decide to structure it a certain way, then the numbers will fall into place. Otherwise, like I said, it's just an idea. It may just be blowing in the wind, but let's not miss the opportunity to see if it can be a benefit to the town. And again, I
Brian,
thank you.
you're on mute,
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this.
and Bob has his hand raised, by the way.
Oh, Bob. Where is Bob? Someone has a
Right
Bob.
now.
Yeah, I apologize. I was actually trying to unraise my hand. I don't want to keep the conversation going on. I mean, I would just point out one issue that is really fundamental to the whole argument, that it's not a financial issue. And it's the whole thing is being presented like an opportunity to make money. And I'm sure wherever you put a solar panel, there's an opportunity to make money. But I think there's a fundamental threshold issue here that the town has fairly recently embarked on a massive initiative to develop this property and put a permanent conservation restriction on it as a recreation area, and to accept large sums of money and to develop it into a recreation area. And that is a permanent restriction. And we talk about all we need is legislation. That Article 97, it's not just a piece of legislation it's a major process to take a permanent conservation restriction and extinguish it. And I would just say is that it may not be just your traditional, well, I'm going to put a petition article in and we're going to overturn all of the, the policy initiative of the town. And I would say is that probably what needs more discussion is not the financial aspects of this project, but really, the full recreational planning policy initiatives of the town. And, whether if we're going to pursue additional solar, and my understanding is that there are at least 2 major projects in the pipeline right now that, what we first do is analyze the feasibility of the various sites and not embark willy-nilly on, massive projects to overturn, the recreation land, to do this. And I know it seems like there's dollar signs out there, but the real issue is if we're going to do solar, where should it be? And not focus on one kind of area like this, it seems almost like a whipsaw effect, that so much effort was spent at protecting this property, and now we're going to just focus on this property and try to unprotect it. And that process alone will take you years of effort and resources. So I'm sorry to, as I say, I tried to lower my hand and now I said it, darn it.
I appreciate you speaking up about that, Bob. I think that's a really important way of kind of framing it. And yeah, I think there is merit in the idea of, I mean, I think this committee has talked at length about we need to explore revenue generation wherever we can, but I think I like your approach of let's look at holistically, what's going to make the most sense in terms of, a location, and kind of explore from there rather than starting with one single location. I like that a lot. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on. Tom, we appreciate you coming in this evening.
Thank you.
Pat, I believe we have budget transfers to go over. Or at least one of them.
Yes, sir. Let me get that for you.
While we're waiting, can I just enter one thing? Let me make a comment on what Bob said, and I wholeheartedly agree, and thank you for saying that. I'm a golfer, by the way. But let's go to the reductio ad absurdum here. Why don't we put them on the beach?
Good point. Funny point.
Erosion.
Art. This evening, I put before you a transfer requested by the town libraries. In this year, a number, and Ed, feel free to chime in at any time. In order to help the libraries and the town retain its accreditation with the State Library Board, we've been in waivers for a number of years because they don't feel that we contribute enough to the libraries. So we were given a 5-year process to bring our financial support to the libraries up to a level so that they could retain their connection with the CLAMS program and a number of others. So in doing that, this past year, the town added the cost of custodial services to the libraries, and they took the percentage of what the contract was and then added that that money into the budget, which was about $3,800, I believe. Ed, and correct me if I'm wrong. And then what happened is the provider, the vendor that we established our fees from did not meet our standards, so we were ended up rebidding the monies required for custodial services, and we were $5,000 short within the library budget. Now, normally we would probably use free cash or another way to support this, but considering COVID and the fact that many of the hours at the library normally would be open, they were closed, there was sufficient funds within the part-time salaries to make an ask for this transfer to the buildings and grounds of $5,000 to make up the delta so that we could pay for that service for the libraries without needing to look for additional funding from free cash or other areas. Ed, would you like to come in on that?
Hey, Pat, I thought this was going to be on next week's agenda. I don't have any problem doing it now, but.
Okay, and that's fine. I just
mean,
put them
I don't
both
think
in.
there's an issue voting on it. I just want to make sure the committee had time because according to your email, it was going to be on the 14th.
Yeah, it should have been on the 14th. Sorry.
But I don't have any problem voting on it today if anybody, unless the committee didn't get a chance to review it.
If you send it out, I don't have any issue with it.
I would agree. We're there. Let's do it.
Can I just
Go
get just clarification here? The accreditation aspect of the salary issue, that's not affected here, right?
That's correct. There was a balance of about 15,000 a year over the next 5 years to get us up to a 75,000 delta between what the state felt that we should be contributing to retain our accreditation and what we presently were doing. So what we've been trying to do step by step is to take those indirect costs such as OPED, energy, custodial services, and add them back in instead of having them in other areas of the budget to show the realistic expense of running the library division.
Okay. Thank you.
Ed, do you want to make any comments on this before we move to vote?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Any
Aye.
questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay, we'll go for a roll call. Stephanie,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Moving on to the next budget transfer, I believe this is.
I'll leave this for Ed to explain.
Ed, the floor is all yours.
Yes, there's an immediate need for some tree money that's been totally expended by the Department of Public Works. This is also in our strategy for the next couple of years as it relates to the tax levy, where this is an example of taking an existing article and repurposing that article for the use of trees within the article as opposed to the tax levy. So the Department of Public Works wanted $40,000 per year in tree money. They wanted $40,000 this year. They tried to put it $30,000 into the levy to get it up to $40,000. This is a move just to move it away from the levy, utilize existing funds, and help out our tax levy. And this is something that we talked about as part of our overall strategy as it relates to the $600,000 in reduction in tax levy.
Anybody have any questions concerning this transfer? Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor?
So
I'll
moved.
move it.
Is there a second?
George got it. Stephanie, you're next.
I'll second it.
For the vote, Stephanie,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. All right, what is next on our agenda? So new business, and I think Ed's going to step in here and talk about the schools. I know there's been some work done on that budget, and I hope he has some good news for us.
Ed, you're a co-host if you need to share anything.
Ed, you there?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. I'm not sure how many of you watched the selectmen meeting on Tuesday or yesterday as it relates to their decision to put an override out to the public, $420,000 override. That goes a long way with the $600,000 you all have used to pull away from the tax levy, and puts us in a position, along with, hopefully we have some time to discuss this evening as well, is the $200,000 that we will get as chargebacks from the golf department. That was something that we covered with the golf department today, and they were acceptable of that. So that means that if the override passes, then based on your efforts to work on the tax levy and the chargeback to golf, we should be in good shape as it relates to balancing our budget. No use of short-term rental money. This gives us a clean budget to deal with what we need to do going forward. If the override passes, if it doesn't, then we need to make some more moves.
And I'm confused. I thought the idea of putting an override was sort of a fail-safe of if we weren't able to get everything that we were trying to do through reducing the budget and using the short-term rental funds and kind of getting to that point that we could make it. And so now, so the select board is now saying that that's a preferred choice?
They preferred to utilize the override method as opposed to any other method. I think they want to probably illustrate that they don't want to put as much of a burden on the general fund as would have happened otherwise. And their option between doing a $979,000 override, a $420,000 override, or no override was to select the $420,000 override. And
Okay.
I did indicate that the Finance Committee's preference was that we do this without an override.
Ed, do you have any new documentation that we can look at that breaks all this down? Doesn't need to be right now, but is there something that we could look at?
In terms of how we balance the budget?
Yeah,
Sure.
just like the spreadsheets we've been utilizing.
Sure. I can update that to plug in the override in the golf chargeback to show how we balance the budget. Yes.
Okay. And was there any further development of for the school committee to bring down the deficit?
I think there'll be some further negotiations. They had a bit of a misstep. They submitted their budget assessment at lower than it should have been because they didn't take into consideration the exempt debt that's related to the middle school. So there may be some further negotiations.
And when does that need to be finalized before we need to print these?
Like Monday.
Last Monday or this Monday?
Yeah, I'm just kidding, but it has to be soon, very soon. And we're working on a proposal.
Okay.
So Ed, this, what the select board is supporting is that we wouldn't use the short-term rental money. Is that correct?
I think it was a matter of essentially saying that this is an amount over proposition. So the select board has for years indicated that anything over proposition 2.5, as it relates to the school, would be put on an override. So that's been their position for several years. And I think that they are currently taking that position as well, that what they want to do is put on the ballot in an override amount, but we're taking an override amount less the amount of shifting of students between Yarmouth and Denison. And Bob has his hand up, so I'll let him add additional information.
Bob?
Two things. I think Bob Rittenauer has done some good work with the school superintendent on this issue. I think Stephanie is correct that a lot of the discussion last night revolved around the Board of Selectmen not knowing what the school committee is ultimately going to do. So rather than have no override, they believe that they needed to have some fail-safe, as you put it correctly, an article, so that if the school committee decides not to put any of their E&D or very little of their E&D towards the budget, at least we would have the ability to have an override of some amount. Now, the other thing is next Tuesday, the school superintendent is going to present her budget and might encourage members of the finance committee, if they wish, to tune in to that, just to hear firsthand what they're thinking of doing. On Monday night, the school committee is meeting and possibly might make some adjustments. But I think Bob Rittenauer may have better more detailed information based upon his discussions with the superintendent.
Well, there was one issue that I wanted to add that I think would be of interest to the Finance Committee, that in our meeting with the school officials, that, one of the critical points that was raised, and, this started with the discussions that Ed has been having with them for months and months now, is the use of the excess and deficiency funds in order to reduce the overall budget. And in their efforts to assist the town, one of the key pieces is that they agreed that they'd like to use an additional $485,000 in their E&D that would be specifically devoted towards covering some of the short-term interest on their new construction project. And the issue that we have there, I think that is a tremendous step forward, because the E&D funds are available in an amount to safely do that. However, those funds, if the town were to raise those, it comes from a debt exclusion, so it's exempted debt. So with the school proposing to use $485,000 for that purpose, what that will do is lower the tax bills for residents of the town by that $485,000, but the town can't use those funds to offset its assessment. So even with the additional reductions that have been made and the Gulf revenues, we would be able to reduce tax bills by $485,000, but not use those funds to offset the additional shortfall for making up that school assessment. And I think that was one of the factors that led the Board of Selectmen to selecting an amount that would be that fail-safe amount of $420,000, which is slightly less than the savings to taxpayers from the use of those E&D funds, but would, if required, and provide additional funds to meet that assessment within Prop 2.5 without taking action to repurpose some of the local estimated receipts and other items that are purposed for other areas. So there is hopefully somewhat of an offset to that 420 with the use of the E&D funds as well. So that together, the net result would be that it's almost a revenue neutral approach to meeting the assessment.
Thanks, Bob. Pat, do you happen to know when we're going to get language for us to be able to vote on that and the plethora of other things we need to vote on?
Last night, the selectmen voted on the warrant, and so Bob, I would believe, Bob Lawton, that the language is available by the end of the week to send to the committee?
There are two parts, Mr. Chairman. The language that the Board of Selectmen voted for is on the ballot. That is completed, and that is ready to be submitted. In working with the staff and the administrator's office, the goal is to have the warrant, with the operating budget, et cetera, in it, to be done by the end of the week, and hopefully getting that to you before your Wednesday meeting, so you can at least start to look at it. In the chart that I did at Bob Rittenhour's request, I think I was anticipating, and I'm looking at a calendar, that's why I'm looking away, that if you met the 14th and the 21st to do your reviews of the 35 articles, that would be sufficient. With the next important date would be May 4th, when we are required to have the hearing with the Capital Budget Committee and your board to meet the charter requirements for the formal review of the budget. And then publication dates come shortly after that, with the town meeting being on Saturday, the 22nd.
So we'll have time to do these by May 22nd?
I'm sorry, what?
Well, if we meet with the Board of Selectmen on the 4th, we vote
Oh,
on.
yep.
You think 2.5, 3 weeks is enough time to get those printed and,
Oh, yeah.
okay, great.
No, I think Mary Alice in our office has been working with the printer and tells me there should not be any problem because he's already working on, will be working starting Thursday on the town report. And we have a good draft of the warrant itself. It does have to be approved by town council, but think of it, most of the articles are CPC articles. You have the 5 petitions, which we know about, we know what the wording is, CPC articles, and then we have the normal budget articles with capital, the enterprise funds, and you've already really taken care of the operating budget. So about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And capital will be meeting next week, we hope, if we can come to an understanding because of the new request from the police department
yeah.
for the body cameras. PD went before the Board of Selectmen last night to discuss the legislation and their desire to have body cameras within this budget cycle instead of waiting another year. And the finances and such have been put forth that capital now needs to go back and reprioritize their list of recommendations to you so that we can decide. And Ed has found some other, I believe, funding sources. Ed, if you want to speak to that. I see your hand.
I was going to talk about another subject. As Bob indicated, you reviewed and voted on the operating budget and the enterprise budgets. The only item that you haven't seen is the revision to the golf to use the retained earnings to pay back to the town. I can show that to you now. We've had significant discussions about the $200,000. If you'd like to look at it and vote on it now, that's great, or you could hold it until your next meeting.
Can we do that vote without it being on the agenda? I would love to. Yes.
I suggest no.
I agree with you. So that's certainly something we will put on the agenda next week.
Easy.
Pat, would you just be able to, I heard a lot of dates and I didn't really write any of them down. Would you just be able to send out a list of when we're going to have all of these votes and what the topics will be? So not just the invite and agenda for next meeting. That'd be super helpful. And when
I didn't say yes yet, you just passed that without me saying yes, but okay, sure. I'd be happy.
I'm assuming because you're so great and on top of everything.
Not a problem.
Mary Alice will give you the dates that Bob and I did today.
That's great. And then, so my question is, when we undertake our votes on the petitioned articles that we just reviewed, the one question that's still outstanding in my mind with regards to I don't know if they're articles 30 and 31, what numbers they are, but the procurement article, as well as the construction of town properties article, is just what town staff, what town departments generally are thinking of this, what town administration is generally sentiments are about. Are there any major red flags that the town departments and staff would raise? That's the only question that I have.
Those are tough.
Answer that now or let us know later.
It's going to be difficult to sit here and say that we're opposed to looking into the purchase of electric vehicles. I don't think anyone would say that we don't all have the strong desire to enhance the fleet of electric vehicles. I think we've got, maybe a handful of them now, a small handful. But there's a lot of analysis that goes into that. There's no clear methodology laid out to perform these life cycle costs. I'm not going to say it's a draconian bylaw, but that's a pretty strong prescriptive bylaw. And, I can only say I'd be much more comfortable if it required, some type of an analysis just to make a decision whether it was advisable. But the bylaw is very prescriptive and it's very, very loaded on having all electric vehicles. And, you know, that forces you now, you're going to jump into the police department and tell them you will drive an electric car. I think that, you know, the bylaws sort of went right off, you know, as strong as they possibly could go. And without, you know, I mean, the question I have is, this looks like this is a town committee. And why would a town committee do a study and then, I mean, maybe it's evident, I'm the only dummy here, and not come through the Board of Selectmen and review their results and debate. Instead, they decide that it's a great idea, and so they just make it the strongest possible law and eloquently defend it. I mean, it is, you know, a fervor I can see. But I think it's an extraordinarily kind of a steep incline that makes for the town in terms of it really forces you to buy those electric vehicles or perform, you know, these detailed analyses. And I mean, I would have liked a little softer approach, especially given the fact that everyone's saying is that, oh, in 10 years, you can't buy an internal combustion car. Well, you know, I don't know. It's like, I support the concept, but I think that to get that dumped on you cold, it's a pretty strong bylaw, and it's a pretty steep test that you have to follow.
Thanks, Bob. What about the doing study for construction of new town buildings? I imagine it might cost a little bit more upfront, but we might, you know, have more options available to us. Are there any major red flags around that?
I don't see a major red flag. I mean, I didn't understand some of the discussion where they said that nobody studied it for the DPW facility. I'm sure they analyzed it, and I'm sure every project should legitimately, you know, analyze things. But it's just when you say you will buy this, you will buy that, every home shall be electric by 2020. You know, so I do support performing that analysis for public construction projects, and the ideas like involving the Cape Light Compact. Those are good ideas. I haven't studied that bylaw and determined if we all have to go to jail if we make a misstep, but they're strong. They're strong bylaws.
Okay, and then the first one, which was in the legislature, I would have called that like a non-binding resolution. That's just sort of a statement of values. It's not, there's nothing prescriptive about that, right?
Right. I like that one the most.
Of course you do. All right. Well, thank you.
There's no teeth. There's just kind of, we think this is nice and everybody agrees, but exactly, no teeth.
And how about that solar program? That's awesome.
Oh yeah, the Cape Light Compact one?
Well, the solarized one that Mr. Murphy was talking about, that's gonna, you know, $2 a watt for local homeowners. Great program.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've kind of run our course this evening. It's 8:16. Does anybody have any further comments or questions, or like to bring up some more new business that we can discuss for the next time? Sarah, you got anything for me?
Yeah, let's adjourn.
I think that's the nicest thing I've heard. So is that a motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Stephanie,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. I think that's going to do it for this evening.
Next week, same time, same place?
Of course. I hope you enjoyed your 1 week reprieve last week.
Yes, sir. I can't tell you that I was happy to be quarantined, but I'll tell you I'm happy that I'm fine.
I bet you weren't. All righty. I think that's it. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.
Thanks and welcome, Bob.
Everybody get some rest. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, town staff, we did pretty well.
No, that were, Mary Alice should have those dates because we just did them today. Didn't all include